You know what really gets me is when sensitivity readers have to go through every piece of literature of the 21st century and tell you you're wrong, you're offensive. Everything you have written in the history of mankind is deemed offensive by today's standards. Don't matter that it was written 50, 70 years ago, it's offensive and it cannot be published today. That's what's going on here, and we're seeing it spiral out of control. This has been something that happened with Wizards of the Coast and Dungeons and Dragons after the Hazodi incident for the new version of D&D with their Starfinder stuff coming out, or it's not Pathfinder, it's Star Frontier or whatever model it was there. People found it offensive, and the sensitivity readers were brought in to go over the rest of D&D products. Namely, back a long time ago, there was a book called Oriental Adventures, and they put a disclaimer on it saying this was written in a time where, by today's standards, it is deemed offensive, even though it just propped up, and this is the way one person saw the world that day. Today, we get things like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory being censored, or at least they want to censor it. After public outcry, they walk that back. But today, now, they are going after James Bond, of all things. At what point does this offend the original writers? Ian Fleming for James Bond, writing it in the image of a British actor to always play James Bond. That was the idea of the James Bond books. It was a spy. It was done in a day and age where you had people spying on each other, where governments were literally sabotaging each other constantly. Well, we're back into that day where governments are putting out misinformation and disinformation and all these buzzwords that are out there on the market. And now we have sensitivity readers that have to go through your books. They need you to turn in your books. They need you to go back to the library and return them because they are offensive. They are offensive for you to own. They are offensive for you to sell. And that is where we are today. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory was a classic. It's always been a classic, and I believe the redone version of it with Johnny Depp was actually a really well done and kind of stuck to the guns of the actual thing. And now we have James Bond books rewritten to remove offensive references. It comes days after a row over the editing of the Roald Dahl books. This is getting absolutely ridiculous at this point. Racial references have been removed from Ian Fleming's James Bond novels following a sensitivity review. Terms such as the N-word, which featured in his writing in the 1950s and 1960s, have been edited out. New editions of the 007 books, which are set to reissue in April. You know what else also stopped the N-word? There was a CBC, this is in Canada here, there was a CBC news article that came out where they actually spoke about the N-word because the N-word was in the title of a book. The CRTC, the Canadian Commission that oversees Canadian broadcasting, came down and fined the CBC broadcasting for even stating this word. This is what's coming down the pipeline in Canada with Bill C-11. And because of people like this with sensitivity reading, where they need to censor out certain terms, certain names, certain everything from the 1950s. Last I checked, we're in 2023 and we're all adults that are grown up enough that we can skip over these things. We don't need original works censored. Original works, honestly, to own them are worth more than what this reissue is going to be. This reissue is going to be worth absolutely nothing because they want to censor it. They want to turn it away and tell you how you have to think. Some depictions of black people have also been reworked and removed, but references to other ethnicities, including the term for East Asian people and Bond's mocking views of Oddjob, Goldfinger's Korean henchmen, remain. So now they're picking and choosing which ones come out by the sensitivity readers. Well, that's not a bias at all, is it? I don't know where this goes anymore. This is absolutely ridiculous. Revised lines include Bond's assessment in Live and Let Die that African would-be criminals are pretty law-abiding chaps, I would have thought, except that they have been drunk too much, which has been changed to pretty law-abiding chaps, I should have thought. Mostly peaceful protests in a James Bond book upcoming very soon. This is getting a little ridiculous. However, references to the sweet thing of the R word that you can't say on YouTube, blithering women, doing a man's work, and homosexuality being described as a stubborn disability have been kept in, reported the Daily Telegraph. So they're picking and choosing which ones are sensitive here? If this was the case, why wouldn't you just not reprint the book? If it comes down to where you're not allowed to reprint the book because of certain words that are in the book, I guess you don't reprint it. If that's the way you want to go, let's up the value of the original printings, first editions all the way. This is why digital media is useless. Unless you own solid media, it's going to go this way. Digital media is always going to be upgraded to the new terms, and because the perpetually offended will continue to be offended by something new. This is absolutely ridiculous at this point. A number of updates have been made in this edition while keeping as close as possible to the original text and the period in which it was set in. They're keeping it that it was set in the 1950s when he originally wrote the book, but by today's standards, you're not allowed to print these things. This is where we're going. This is how literature is going. This is how fantasy, how movies have turned for the worse, and why people are turning a blind eye to this stuff. Why they're walking away from the movie theaters. Is it Ant-Man and the Wasp did very poorly at the movie theater, and people went and saw Cocaine Bear instead because who doesn't want to see a big giant black bear chase down an ambulance while high as a kite? Come on. Ant-Man and the Wasp, all the superhero stuff that's going on with the MCU, it's died out. It's done. No one wants to see the second string Avengers. Everyone wants to see the original Avengers. It's all about Iron Man, Thor, Spider-Man. All of those. That's what people want to see. They don't want to see the second string stuff because they're stories that have been told time and time again through the comic books, and then they peter out. Then they start them over again. That's where the MCU is right now. They've died. Now, with James Bond, it's always something offensive in James Bond. They're always trying to reboot it. They're always trying to take something else out of this narrative. And this is where we are today. Can we just leave classics alone? Can we keep the classics the way they are? Yes, there was some stuff that would be found offensive today, but we're all adults here. We can all live to look it over and say, hey, that was offensive. That's what offends me today. But that doesn't mean it needs to be written out. That means the history is being rewritten. And we don't want history being rewritten. We want history told the way it was, because that's what happened. Anyway, guys, I'm your proud Canadian Phoenix Cineshadow. I'm going to sign off here. Hope you like this one. Don't forget to like and subscribe.